Nice way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul. I see you. All right, John. Finish on. Good call.
Great job, guys. Coach Carl, we love you!
Hey there, it's Coach Curl here, and welcome to episode 226 of the Today's Leader podcast. Today, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce to you Clint Padgett. Now, Clint is a seasoned entrepreneur with over 30 years' experience as a project manager and leader. He's a published author, he's a teacher, and an absolute expert in team building and the art of conversation. Just you wait for his insights around the difference between communication and conversation. Clint's been helping leaders and their teams implement repeatable, sustainable strategies to deliver high-stakes projects on time and on target. Clint's vast level of experience positions himself to reshape the landscape of project management to better reflect today's new business models. With the modern organisation becoming more fast, more agile and highly reactive, it's imperative that companies use a method that's proven to actually work, and Clint brings this to the table. He brings a collaborative, actionable approach that leads to team commitment and a buy-in, even when, and let's face it, most organisations are going to suffer from this, the silos and departmental rivalry. He delivers knowledge and motivation, strategic initiatives, and ultimately transforms businesses and helps them create a competitive advantage. He's also a Forbes book featured author, a Forbes speaker, a thought leader, and frequently speaks at conferences on the subject of project management and teamwork. After a word, once again, from our sponsor, Think and Grow Business, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Clint Padgett to the Today's Leader podcast.
The Coach Curl podcast is brought to you by Think and Grow Business, the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind. If you're serious about growing your business, get serious and join a mastermind group today. Find out more at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au.
It's my pleasure to welcome Clint Padgett to the Today's Leader podcast. How are you today, Clint?
Doing well, thanks.
Good to hear. So tell me the Clint Padgett story.
It's a long one, so that means I'm old. Basically, I wanted to be an electrical engineer since I was about 9 years old and started checking out books on robotics and lasers and didn't have the money to go to college. So right out of high school, I joined the Navy, spent 6 years in the Navy on an aircraft carrier. And there's probably no greater motivation to go to college in the world than to do something like that. So when I got out of the Navy, I worked in the shipyard for a couple months waiting on college to start, and then spent some time at Georgia Tech getting a double E degree and at Duke University getting an MBA. And then literally my first job out of college was I walked across the street to Coca-Cola. And that's where I got introduced to project management, which is the world I live in today. And that's what I've been doing since the mid-90s.
So you run a company called Project Success. You've written a couple of books. So what was the compelling reason why project management became your focus?
Well, I really enjoyed the work, and I enjoyed the fact that every project was different. The teams were different at different companies. In fact, I've learned much more about Coca-Cola as a company, having been a consultant doing projects for them, than I ever learned in my 6 years that I spent there as an employee. Because I got to work on projects in security and marketing and the new world of Coke and in construction projects, plus all the worldwide sports projects. We've been fortunate enough as a company to plan all the worldwide sports for Coca-Cola since the early 90s. So we've done their activations around the Summer and Winter Olympics since 1991. And the FIFA World Cup since 1998. So you get to learn a lot more about that. I found the projects to be interesting and diverse. Yeah. And I like working with teams and having them turn the corner and the light bulb goes off and see them successful.
As a consultant, you've probably seen both ends of the spectrum in terms of successful implementation of projects or, any sort of change management process. What do companies get wrong with project management?
I think the biggest single thing they do wrong is they assume everyone knows and understands what the project is, because the leader probably knows and understands, but that doesn't mean that his cohorts understand.
Yeah.
And everybody has their own take on what it is. So for us, it's all about getting the team together up front and saying, hey, what is this project? Let's make sure that we, the team, agree on what it is. And then let's confirm that with our customer to make sure that's actually what she or he wanted.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the biggest downfall is people just assume, hey, everybody knows their job. We've been doing this stuff in the past. Just go make it happen. And they lose sight of the fact that maybe somebody's new to the team. Maybe things have changed a little bit. Or don't forget, there's 10 other projects going on competing for these people's time as well.
Yeah. And we all have our own lens to the world. We all have the way that we view things. So, even something as simple as, when companies can put together their value statements, there are so many different interpretations within people of, say, what a value of respect would be, for example. So you're competing with all of that as well. So how do you overcome that assumption?
You have to force people to get together and have a conversation. So we force people into a room for, say, 3 or 4 hours to talk about the scope of the project, the objectives of the project, who's going to own which steps. We make people take ownership.
So conversation as opposed to communication. Because we all communicate, don't we, Clint? We all communicate.
We think we do. That's one of my favorite quotes, actually, is the fact that I think it was George Bernard Shaw who said that the biggest single problem with communication is the illusion that it is actually taking place. That's the downside, right? So I have a chapter in my new book called Communicate Like a Person, Not an Emoji. And one of the things that I found was I had in my own mind the definition of communication was incorrect. In my mind, I thought what I was doing right now with you on this podcast is communicating because we're having a dialogue. That's actually not the definition of communication. Communication is actually defined as the act or process of using words, sounds, or behaviors to express ideas. Whereas what I want to do is have an exchange of ideas. I want to have a dialogue. And that's actually called a conversation, is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas. And we probably have all played a game when we were a child, depending on where you grew up. In the U.S., we call it telephone. I think in the U.K., maybe they call it Chinese whispers. But it's basically there are 5 of you in a row or 6 of you in a row, and the first person whispers in the second person's ear a secret. And they're supposed to whisper to the next person on down the line. Yeah. And we all know what happens is what comes out of person number 5's mouth is not remotely close to what got whispered in person number 1's ear. Yeah. And the reason I believe that happens is because each individual is communicating to the next person. They're taking what they heard, putting their own thought around it, their own spin around it, their own interpretation around it, and then communicating what they think it is. And so 5 people later, it's very different than what actually got said up front. What would make it be the same as what comes out of the last person as what goes into the first person is if each individual person, when they got told the secret, could turn around and say, so what do you mean by that? Did you mean go left right now or go left, at the next block, at the next intersection? What do you mean by that term? If you can ask clarifying questions, then what happens is the message you whisper in person number 1's ear gets communicated all the way down to person number 5. So we want to have conversations, not communication.
Excellent. And interesting while you were just talking then, Clint, took me back to my days when I was leading teams in the retail world, and so many times a leader would come to me after something had failed or gone wrong, or they were reporting back and letting me know. And one of the key things that they would always say is, but I told my team. And it was almost like it was like there was a little bit of this blame scattering going on. So it was really an interesting concept. So what scares leaders around conversation?
I don't know that they're scared around it. I just don't think they recognize it needs to be done. I mean, I think they say, well, everybody knows their job. I've said this before in a big meeting. Clearly everybody had the right, understood what I meant. And it just doesn't hurt to say, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. Let's make sure we have a conversation in some way, shape, or form to make sure that what I said got translated properly to the individuals doing the work, and they're going to actually give me what I want in the end. Yeah.
So talk me through that process. You've got the team into a room. You're wanting to get this conversation stoked, and you're wanting to get understanding and clarity. We know that there's different personality types. Some people are going to be sitting in the corner just not participating potentially. Talk me through that process. How does that happen?
So it's basically the job of whoever's leading that meeting is to pull people into the conversation. Because you're absolutely right. If there's 20 people in the room, there will probably be 3 people who dominate the conversation.
Yeah.
There'll be another 5 or 6 who are happy to participate but won't start the conversation. And then the other 10 are sitting there hoping nobody calls on them, right?
Yeah.
And so your job as a leader of that session is to make sure you're looking for nonverbal cues. Is this person rolling their eyes when something gets said? Is this person drumming their fingers? Are they bored? Are they whispering to their seatmate because they don't agree with something? And then your job as the leader of that session is to say, well, I'm not sure everybody agrees with the last statement, and force people to be a part of the conversation, which is not always, people's personalities aren't always like that necessarily.
Yeah. And that can be quite uncomfortable for some of those team members. So have you ever seen an adverse reaction to bringing up or getting the conversation going?
Not really. I mean, I think as long as you couch it in the right way, if you're not aggressive about it, if you don't say that, hey, Clint doesn't like this and you put me on the spot, I think if you just say, I'm not sure everybody agreed with that statement, and maybe ask somebody different what they think, and then come back to that person doesn't agree and ask for their opinion. So it's not obvious they were the one that didn't agree at first. I think if you just pull people gently in, I mean, people want to be heard. They just don't want to be shot down.
Yeah, yeah. And absolutely critical point of view there. Don't want to be shot down. How many times in my history, unfortunately, I've seen leaders shoot the messenger more often than not. And that's one of those really challenging things for a leader, because it's not like they're not being personally attacked by someone having a difference of opinion or a different perspective.
Yeah, I've seen the projects go sideways because the project manager created an environment where the truth wasn't acceptable. I want to tell you the truth, but if that truth gets used to beat me over the head with, then okay, I won't do that again. Yeah. And then what you've done is, I mean, in my world, we know that in real life projects, things are going to go poorly. Things are not going to go well. Pandemics happen. Factories burn to the ground. I mean, things are going to happen. And I'm okay with the bad news. What I'm not okay with is bad news you've known about for 6 months that are now just sharing with me finally. I've lost 6 months of the ability to actually fix the problem. So I think as a leader, you want to create an environment where people are not scared to bring up the bad news, because they don't control it.
Yeah, Andy Stanley, I'm sure, has a quote in relation to something like that. Though I always get my quotes mixed up, but something along the line, when a leader refuses to listen, they've got a team with nothing to say. And that's a real challenge for a lot of people who are potentially driven more from an ego perspective in their leadership, because all of a sudden when they need that team perspective, e.g. with a project, and you want to get the project management, you want to get the conversation happening, if a leader has potentially stifled the conversation right up until that point, it's going to be really hard to stimulate that conversation, because people will believe that there's another agenda.
And the other thing, it hurts the leader in the end, because the world that I live in, people work in multiple projects at the same time. Nobody has a dedicated team. So the people on the team might be working on 5 other projects, including the one that they're assigned to my project on. And most of the world today works in a matrix, so I don't actually own the people on my team. Yeah. I don't give them pay raises. I don't give them job reviews. That's their functional manager. So therefore, I don't own the people on my team, and I'm competing for their time with others. The only chance I'm going to be successful is if people take accountability and actually force themselves to do the work. Yeah. And guess what? If this person is on 6 different teams and as a leader, I'm constantly shooting the messenger, guess whose work goes to the bottom of the pile? Yeah. The person they don't want to deal with, right? Yeah. And that's a problem.
Talk about cross-functional. So we know in some organizations, well, in a lot of organizations, we create these silos around, marketing, operations, logistics, business development. Obviously, within a lot of projects, there's a need for that cross-functional collaboration. How do you work in that space?
It's actually all we do. Everything we do is cross-functional. We believe in collaborative approach. We believe in team-centric planning. So if your project is to get a new product to market, then in addition to marketing, you better have sales. You better have the engineering team. You need IT involved. Does legal need to be on the team? And we bring them together for that session up front to understand and agree on the project. And then we plan the entire project with everybody's input. And then everybody goes back to their worlds, and we just remind them when things are due, and they do the work and report the status of it. So that way you have an integrated plan that's built by the team believes in and is committed to delivering on. But you have to have collaboration, because silos is one of the things that kills you when you talk about project work. Yeah. Is this, I call it siloitis, but And let's be honest, there's a reason why people like that. It's certainly exacerbated by the fact that our organizations are often set up that way. But as human beings, we kind of like that because we like being around like-minded people, somebody who thinks like I do, speaks the same language that I speak. That's why when I deal with big sessions, if there's 100 people in the room, what always happens is all the engineers sit together. Why? Because they all speak the same language. They all think the same jokes are funny. They all had to take differential equations in college, so they had that shared pain. And then the next group over might be the IT folks all sit together because they kind of speak a technical language. They don't mind sitting next to the engineers. And both groups want to be as far away as possible from the marketing team. And the reason is because as an engineer, and I could talk about this because I am one, I don't speak marketing.
Yeah.
I don't understand the language you use. The words you use make no sense to me. And so people want to fall back into their silos. And I think good leaders force themselves out or force their teams out of silos. Don't allow that to happen. And that's not always easy because the tendency is to want to stay in that silo.
Yeah.
And you have to make them work together. You have to because the way I always put it is most companies that I know of are for-profit enterprises. They want to make money.
Yeah.
And I ask the question this way. If marketing is out there selling something engineering can't build, are we going to make money? I mean, the answer, of course, is no. If engineering is building a widget that marketing can't sell, we're not going to make money. So you better be collaborating and communicating, working together in order to build something that the company can actually sell in the marketplace and benefit and profit from.
Yeah. It's a good way to think about it. And in so many ways, it also brings up a conundrum for many leaders. They want to build their own bulletproof team and have them all going in the one direction, aligned with the company goals. And then you want to potentially siphon some of that. So, but that's the reality. That's what we should be doing. The company objectives, the overall business objectives, is the ones that businesses and business teams should be aligning to. So Clint, how do you deal? So you've worked in project management. You've got a couple of books. Your new one's called How Teams Triumph, which is coming soon, I believe. But how do you deal with the inevitable troughs or the inevitable perception of failure during your particular leadership journey?
So I don't know that I've ever worked on a project that did not have challenges. It's just the way that it works. You know, we've done some massive projects I think the biggest one I ever personally worked on had 25,500 tasks in it, which is a massive project.
Wow.
And but even if our normal one is say 1,000 or 2,000, none of those are going to go flawlessly. Something is always going to happen. There's going to be something we didn't know about, what I call the unknown unknowns, or things I didn't know. There's also the known unknowns, the things you don't know, like who's going to be sick, how long they're going to be sick. You know somebody's going to be sick. You just don't know when or how long. Yeah. These things are going to happen. So what you do is you have to have a project plan that allows you to go back in and say, all right, now we got this really piece of bad news. What is the impact on the plan or the schedule of that bad news? And people say, well, the end date's going to move. So in your world, Clint, the end date must just keep moving. No, the end date moves for 30 minutes when we see the impact of this change. But then we apply the deadline again as a team. I don't want to get too technical. We find the activities making the slate called the critical path. Yeah. And as a team, we bring those things back. So at the end of the meeting, we've integrated all the bad news and all the other update information, and we've recompressed the schedule back to the deadlines. And you do that on a periodic basis, weekly or biweekly, so that you're maintaining and managing the change.
Okay, so keeping an eye on the prize, basically, and then, but working through the challenges as they come. But it's not an automatic. Let's just shift the deadline out, and we lose a month, so we've got to add a month. So, yeah, I mean that works in some situations where the deadline isn't that hard, but most of the ones that I'm involved with, there's a huge financial loss if we don't hit the date. Yeah, okay. So, who's influenced you in your leadership journey? Who are those major influences that help motivate you and keep you on track?
I would say twofold. One would be the team that I work with at Project Success. And we've got some fantastic individuals with lots and lots of experience, and I hold them in high regard. And then the clients I get to work with. I mean, these are some superior people and great organizations, great leadership skills, and they move mountains to make this stuff happen. And I'm always impressed by those.
Okay. So when we talk about leadership of today, and one of the things that was striking to me the concept of conversation. We certainly need conversation in the world today. I would imagine if we had more people willing to have some conversation, we probably wouldn't see some of the challenges that we're seeing. So when we talk about leadership of today, what are some of the traits that a good leader needs to have?
I would say the number one skill is listening.
Yeah,
and I think to me, the person who speaks less and listens more is going to come out better in the end, because you want to create, again, I create environments where people are willing to tell me things. And so if I'm doing all the talking, there's no airspace for them to tell me things.
Yeah.
So I think one is just listen, listen to what your team has to say, and also treat them with respect. And like you said earlier, don't shoot the messenger. When the bad news happens, deal with the bad news. Now, I will be honest in saying that if the same person delivers bad news over and over again, then I got to think maybe I got the right person in that slot. But overall, bad things are going to happen. And I think listening to me is probably the number one skill, being respectful of the team. And at the end of the day, we believe very much in team-centric work. And so, we've got some core tenets that we subscribe to, which is, one of my favorite ones is, people often say, I'm afraid to leave the room when we do planning because my name gets assigned to everything while I'm gone. But one of our basic tenets is,
Clint, that doesn't happen, surely.
Right. Well, it doesn't happen, luckily, in our world, because one of our core tenets is your name cannot be assigned to a task unless you are A, in the room, and B, agree to take it. And why? Because we want to drive that accountability. And one is much more accountable to a task that he or she is volunteered for than one that got assigned to them when they're out of the room.
Yeah.
We also believe that person is the only person who controls the duration, how long it takes, because that person knows how many other projects they're working on, whether they have a sick child at home, what their workload looks like. And then they tell us what they need to start their work, what we call the predecessors in technical terms. And what we find is if you give somebody those three things, they will accept ownership of the activity and will hold themselves accountable to get it done. And in the real world, I think as a leader, what you want is that. You want people holding themselves accountable. Yeah. One of the things I found interesting is there was a survey done back in the late 90s here in the U.S. by U.S. News and World Report. And they interviewed a bunch of people and they said, I'm going to give you some names. And I'd like you to tell me what chance you think they have of getting into heaven. So this is clearly a dated list from 1997 when I read off the names, but Bill Clinton, 52% chance of getting into heaven. Hillary Clinton, 55% chance. I guess she had another 3% for putting up a bill. I guess that's how it worked, right? So this is ironically, this was literally, I think 1 or 2 months before, it was in March of 97. So just a short time before Princess Di passed away. Yeah. She was given a 60% chance of getting into heaven. Wow. Right?
Yeah.
Oprah Winfrey got a 66% chance. So clearly you can buy your way into heaven. So then they said, okay, how about Mother Teresa? Mother Teresa was given, by the people being surveyed, she was given a 79% chance of getting into heaven. Only 79%. Only one person scored higher than Mother Teresa. Who do you think got a higher chance of getting into heaven than Mother Teresa?
I couldn't even think of a person that would be more deserving. I mean,
the people being surveyed.
Truly.
They gave themselves an 87% chance of getting into heaven while giving Mother Teresa a 79% chance.
Doesn't that say so much about human behavior?
So let's dig into that. Why do you think it is? Well, I believe that's because I judge myself off of my intent, my intentions. My intention was to get that thing done. My intention was to work this weekend. My intention was to work late on Friday night. It doesn't matter what I did. I judge myself based on intentions. I judge others on results.
Yeah.
And that's one of the downfalls. We have to stop that. We have to judge ourselves on results. And if you intend to do great things but never do them, what difference does that make? So we can't talk about intentions. You have to talk about what actually happened. Yeah.
Good intentions are simply that, good intentions. They're not good results. They're not good actions. They're not good behaviors. They're not good outcomes. So that's an incredibly fascinating insight. And it's so true. We just I didn't intend to offend you with the comment that I made. I didn't intend. I mean, it's just got so much relevance just in everything that we're seeing at the moment. So leaders are readers. What are you currently reading, and which book has had the biggest impact on you?
I think one of them would be, let me look at the book up right. I got it right here. It's called The One Thing.
Okay.
And it basically it was written by Kellerer. And so basically he has a big real estate company here in the U.S. And it's what is the one thing that I can do today that by doing it makes everything else either easier or not important.
Wow.
And so really focusing one's attention on the core thing that has to get done right now, as opposed to letting oneself just be dispersed and taken away by too many things at once.
Yeah, I've read reviews on that particular book, and it has made a lot of impact on people. I believe there's another book, and don't I'm not sure who wrote it. Something around the main thing. So there was the one thing and the main thing, and both of them seem to be doing some amazing work where people either focused on the main thing or in the concept of the one thing, doing the one thing today. So that enabled you to get clarity around what you needed to do and what your team needed to do.
Well, I'll put it this way. Before I read that book, my second book was taking forever to write. And then after I read it, I said, okay, I need to this is my one thing. If I can get finished with the book, everything else becomes either easier or not important.
Yeah.
And so I was able to carve out time and make myself do it. So yeah, I got a lot out of it.
So how many books have you written?
Just 2 so far.
Yeah. So I was having a conversation with another leader in the States, an interview on the podcast, and he's written 13 books. And when he gets focus, he can churn out a book in like 11 days. And Mac Story's the gentleman's name. He's got a real focus on blue collar leadership. But what was really interesting about that, because he makes them quite literally quite a tiny or not an in-depth or a hard book to read. And when people ask him, why do you produce such small books? He said, because I want people to read them.
Well, I hope people read it, but I've got the new one has 60,000 words. So
wow.
But the first one I wrote was about the same size, and people said it was an easy read. And
yeah, I think it's important that we all have our own little niche in book areas. But Mac made me certainly feel a bit ordinary, because I did have on the cards to get 2 books out this year, and I'm halfway through one, so I've still got a little bit to do. So maybe I've got to read the one thing and really get focused around that. So,
well, I'm not sure about you, but I know for me, one of my challenges is that I'm a bit of a perfectionist.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is going to have my name on it long after I'm gone.
Yeah.
So I have the tendency to want to micromanage and make sure it's perfect. And I have to remind myself occasionally that the enemy of good enough is perfect, right? If it's good enough to get the point across and educate people, then it's probably good enough to publish. Yeah,
I produced a magazine last year called Today's Leader, and there was 2 final spelling mistakes that made the magazine, unfortunately, and when we edited, we didn't pick it up. But of course, I found out about those 2 spelling mistakes really quite simply. So I thought, when I produce it this year, I'm going to put a prize in there, find the spelling mistake and get a free session or something. So it looks like it's part of the plan.
Yeah, people take great pleasure in pointing out your mistakes, I've noticed.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the vision for you going forward?
Just keep doing what I'm doing. I'll probably write a 3rd book at some point in the future, but right now I'm just going to take satisfaction in having this one out. Keep growing the business, keep trying to help clients do better and be more successful.
Okay. And so when is the How Teams Triumph book coming out? What's the scheduled date there?
Should be September. I don't have an exact date. I talked to him today, but it should be September, early September, I believe.
Excellent. So out of everything that you have accomplished, Clint, over the last couple of years, or, even further, what are you most proud of?
Wow. Well, it's a bit personal, I suppose, but, I grew up in rural South Carolina, and I've lived in all kinds of places. My brother and I and my family, we've lived in the back room of a liquor store for a year and a half on army cots. My brother likes to joke, we had the original double wide trailer because there was 2 single wides we glued together. I've lived in small houses. My brother and I actually, with my family, we lived for 2 years in a 17-foot camping trailer. I mean, that's tight spots, right? So I'm the first person, my brother and I are the first 2 people in my family to go to college. So that's an accomplishment. And then I didn't set out to be an entrepreneur, or a business owner, but it just kind of happened for me. And so I think I'm proud from where I've come to where I am now.
Yeah. And that's a wonderful story. Do you share that often?
I don't. A little bit. It's actually a little not all that, but a little bit that's in the book. But there's a side of me certainly a side of you that says, well, I hated growing up poor, and that's embarrassing to have done that. But on the other hand, it says, here's where I was, here's where I am. I haven't done too badly.
Yeah. And people are always, you never know when people need a message. So the reality is that's a powerful story, especially when, you talk about the American dream, that you can ultimately build something for yourself with hard work ethics and, creating your own opportunity. I think that's a fantastic story. And thank you for sharing it for the listeners of the Today's Leader podcast, because I've got no doubt someone's going to grab that as a little bit of glimmer of hope that they may be looking for and just get on it. So is there anything that I haven't asked you that I should have? So this is your chance, I guess, to jump up on a soapbox, talk about whatever it is that you want to do, make a sale or make a point or change the world.
I'll do the latter two and not the first. I'm not worried about making a sale, but I do want to make a point and get up on my soapbox for a moment. And I do think this is important for leaders as well, is we have to force clarity. That to me, that's what makes projects fail, leaders fail, teams fail, is a lack of clarity. And so, I have a drawing that I had in my book where I feel like the world, as far as communication goes, we've gone full circle. If you think back to caveman days, right? If I wanted to communicate to the rest of my group, we were going to go get dinner, I'd draw the picture in chalk on the wall of a woolly mammoth and a spear, and I'd point outside and grunt, right? And then, of course, for eons as human beings, we communicated by gathering around a campfire, and the elders would tell stories. And then when the young people got to be old, they would keep telling those stories. And that's how we passed data or knowledge down from generation to generation. And then we got written word, and we wrote these massive novels. So kind of talking about what we were just talking about, I think the biggest one I've seen was 2.7 or 3.2 million words.
Wow.
And then the written word, then we got email. And of course, it got, now we're writing a lot less. And then text messaging came out. And if you can't say it in 140 characters, you can't say it. Yeah. And then around the late 90s, emojis came out. And so I feel like we've almost come full circle. Now, if I want to communicate to you, instead of grunt, drawing on the wall with chalk, now I grunt, and type something on 140 characters with a couple of emojis. Yeah. And I think that's one of the problems is how do you interpret these things, right? How many times has someone misinterpreted the tone of an email? Maybe I sent an email that was very innocuous, but the person receiving it had a really bad day and took it the wrong way. Or I was talking to someone recently who had received or had sent an email or a text message with a thumbs up emoji, and they got a phone call. The guy was angry. He says, "Why are you flipping me off?" Because he took it instead of a thumbs up, he took it in a different way. Yeah. And then I always look at how do you interpret these emojis? How do you interpret the tone of an email? So to me, these are great ancillary things you should do, but they should be it's not instead of, but in addition to having the conversation where we actually get some clarity around what it is I meant, and did you interpret what I meant the right way? Yeah.
And once again, a written email is part of that whole intention. I didn't intend to say it the way that you've taken it.
Well, I think with communication, one of the things I found in my career is as human beings, we have this great desire to want to check something off of our to-do list. Done. Well, let's be honest. What is the easiest way to check the thing off my to-do list? Is send you an email saying it's done or a text message saying it's done. What I don't want to do is pick the phone up and say, "Hey, here's what I just did, Tony. Is this what you wanted?" Because you might say, "No, that's not what I wanted at all." So rather than checking something off my to-do list, I walk away from the phone call with 3 additional items now added to it. Yeah. So we have to fight that desire to want to check it off and just be done with it, throw it over the fence, and now it's Tony's problem. It needs to be, did I get what I needed to get done? Are you happy? Now I can move on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a fantastic point to finish on, because clarity for leaders is absolutely critical for success of themselves and success of the organization and their team. So having conversations is obviously a really good, important part of that process. So thank you very much, Clint, for sharing it. Thank you very much for being with us today. How can people connect with you?
Probably the easiest way is just go to clintonmpadgett.com, or they can go to our website at projectsuccess.com.
All right. And everyone, you look out in September when How Teams Triumph. And I'm just reading the blurb here. It's all about dismantling or working through this, breaking down silos, enhancing communication, providing a proven customizable framework to complete projects. So no doubt there'll be a number of listeners that will be quite interested, excited to get into that. Thank you very much for your time today, Clint. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks for having me. It's been my pleasure.
Once again, that was an amazing interview, and I know the leaders that were listening to this episode will have so many takeaways that they've made notes of, that they've taken on board, that have resonated with them. Now, success in projects is what Clint is all about, and every leader works with teams and projects to some extent. And they all crave or they all desire success. Now, Clint pinpoints some of the key ways leaders build success in teams and projects. And for me, I will outline some of the takeaways that I had. First up, let's look at silos. Now, I haven't met an organization yet that doesn't have silos. By its very nature, silos are actually needed in business. We've got marketing departments, we've got engineering departments, we've got sales, we've got HR. All companies have an organizational structure, complete with budgets, responsibilities, and in some cases, self-interest. Now, good leaders have the compelling challenge to build commitment to their department team, at the same time forcing them, in Clint's words, outside of the silo think. So the compelling challenge to build commitment internally with their team, at the same time forcing them outside of the silo. Building a team while forcing people out of the team. It really is about aligning to the company vision, the project vision, committing to the company objectives while understanding the role that they play in achieving them. One thing I know is that forcing teams out of the silo won't happen if a leader is focused on self-interest, if a leader is focused on the team's self-interest. If the leader is solely focused on themselves, it's going to be a challenge to get them, force the team outside of the silo. It's going to be incredibly difficult. It's going to be incredibly challenging. But that's what's needed when we're working in project-based teams. We have to get people thinking more broadly, more around the corporate vision or the project vision, more so than based around what their particular silo vision or key point. And that's a challenge that leaders face. Leaders have to balance that. They've got to build their team internally, but they've also got to be forcing their team outside of the silo for the benefit of the business, the overall organization. Now, another key point was the concept on deadlines. Now, maybe the deadline shifts for 30 minutes. A really key point that Clint talked about. Maybe the deadline shift for, say, 30 minutes while we have a discussion around what that now looks like. If there's been some impediments or if there have been some obstacles placed in front of us for the actual project deadline. But then recommitment occurs and the deadline's back. How often do we see deadlines blow out in organizations? Sometimes it's through lack of care, sometimes it's through lack of commitment. Or even when there is care and commitment, at times external forces challenge us on a deadline. But missing deadlines bring about major costs and major problems, and always should be the least preferred option. Thanks for tuning in, as always. And as we know, in today's disruptive world, good leadership skills will always stand you in better stead, in great stead. If you're looking to build better leadership skills, consider our sponsors, Think and Grow Business and the Coach Curl Academy. Think and Grow Business is the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind, where we focus on personal, professional and business growth. So check them out. Book in a free 30-minute discovery call at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au. And don't forget the Coach Curl Academy. This is my academy. It's got over 78 programs there to help you build a better you. Help you build a better you. Join for just $1 for the first month. The academy that equips you enhances your mindset, your leadership, and your business. And let's check it out at thecoachcurlacademy.com. Don't forget, you are standing stronger, braver, and wiser. And don't ever forget the golden rule. Yes, you know what that is. Just don't be an arsehole. I'll see you next time.